Hello, hello, hello. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you want to monetize the AI opportunity for your career, company, business, or community, this is the channel for you to actually learn about and keep up to date. This is Shadab Hussain. I'm a director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co host.
And I'm the other co-host, Jamie Basilico. I'm a data and AI technical specialist, architect, and I bring over 35 years of expertise in data related and AI domains. And I've worked with many Fortune 500 companies throughout my career. As always, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel. The views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft. So with that, let's dive in. Again, no shortage of things to talk about this week, Shadab. So you want to start us off as usual with the quote of the week?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's start with something very fresh. So there was an Ask Me Anything session on Reddit by OpenAI researchers, engineers, etc. And this is a quotation from there. So Sam Altman said, OpenAI has been on the wrong side of history when it comes to open sourcing its technologies. I personally think we need to figure out a different open source strategy. Not everyone at OpenAI shares this view, and it is also not our current highest priority. We will produce better models going forward, but we will maintain less of a lead than we did in previous years. Unquote. Well, coming from Sam Altman, it was a bit surprising because of course, they started with a charter of creating beneficial AGIs and keeping it open, and of course, they became the most closed company. But I think this is a fair admission on the part of Sam Altman that we have been actually, I think, a little bit on the wrong side. I think he realizes this based on this quote, and maybe they will do something. Probably on the weight side. Look, I mean, to be honest, nobody is doing it all openly, right? In the sense that somebody opens the weight, somebody doesn't open, somebody doesn't tell the data training, etc. Nobody is doing it perfectly, so much so that the Open Source Institute doesn't consider the Llama models actually as open. And of course, Meta differs in that definition. They say that everybody has different definitions, so it's like that. It's all subjective.
Yeah,
But this is a good admission on Sam Altman's part.
yeah, it's there's been a whole bunch that's been brought up, obviously with DeepSeek and what's open source, what's not, and I think that certainly put some pressure on what Sam is thinking about. There's also puts pressure on Meta and their models, the Llama models itself, in terms of what's open source or not. So it's not surprising to see this.
Yeah. In fact, and this session was interesting. In fact, he went on, I think, to allude to 2 points, that two changes that they will do based on some of the recent learning. One was about this open source thing, and he said that this is something that they want to learn from Meta. And the other thing he said that from the inspired by DeepSeek, because DeepSeek R1 model actually shows a lot of interim thinking steps, right, which the O1 currently does not as much. So he said that they're going to actually work more on that, and credit to DeepSeek R1. We will actually show much more interim thinking steps and process as well on the thinking side. So looking forward to some of the changes. And this is as we discussed earlier, right? Just 2 days back. This is, I think, the DeepSeek is a good awakening call. This is actually good for innovation and competition, and that's what we will see.
Yep, agree. So on to some little bit of lighthearted news. Here in the U.S., we're gearing up for the big game, the Super Bowl, between the Chiefs and the Eagles. So the NFL actually made some other news this week other than just the Super Bowl itself. And it actually came about from, I'll call it a somewhat favorable call for the Chiefs in last week's game. But anyway, what am I really getting at? So the NFL is looking at AI-based technology to help in officiating. I don't know how many of you actually follow tennis, but the tennis world has actually gone with AI for the last, what was it, maybe 1 year, 2 years, maybe even 3. And they're using something called Hawkeye. It's a technology from Sony, but the tennis world uses it to determine, what's in or out in terms of the line. So there's been some discussion. Well, why not use that same technology in NFL to understand whether or not, did the ball make the next 10 yards to get a first down? So the NFL, believe it or not, has been looking at this technology. They did use it for one preseason game in this current season. It was with the Giants. Unfortunately, yes, I'm a Giants fan, but different story. But they did use that in the preseason. It was mixed results. It did what it was supposed to do, but it took a little bit of time to be able to come back with, did the ball, surpass a particular mark. But the NFL is definitely relooking at that. And, when you think about what Hawkeye is, it's actually a multi-set of cameras, which then feeds information back into an AI model to determine, hey, did the ball actually make it a further difference? So 60 different cameras. There's 8K cameras used to track the ball. So there are plans by the NFL to actually use this in next season. Unclear whether or not they're going to use it for every team or just try it again in preseason games, but they are plans to at least use it in the next year's preseason games. And, if that's successful, I could certainly see it being rolled out across all the different teams for the whole year. So to me, this makes sense. My own personal view is that this will not replace the officials. I still think you'll have them there. Maybe this will be used as a secondary piece when something needs to be reviewed. But to me, it's all about, all of our different sports games are advancing based upon using AI, whether or not that means interacting with you and me as a fan, or in this case, actually using it during the game.
I think this is a great story. Jimmy, as you know, tennis is my middle name. And in fact, last year actually I wrote a post about when I went to the US Open, how they're using the AI. And Hawkeye actually has been at play at the different tennis tournaments, particularly the major ones, around the world for almost more than a decade, actually. So they have been experimenting over the decade. It was not the primary source of the calls. The linemen and women, they used to make the calls. There has been a lot of controversies around that. In fact, the players in a famous outburst, Serena had that, a fight with the line women about the cause, and it's been going on. Last year they started completely replacing that, so linemen women are pretty much gone from most of the major tournaments, the highest level. It looks like pretty good result because the players seem satisfied. Sometimes the calls, however, what happens, there are some glitches, but those are minor ones. Like, for example, generally on a call there is a voice that will come out and say out, and sometimes the voice doesn't come. However, the calls still are made. So there is an official who's generally available on the court, and they kind of intervene if required. They read the results directly if some part of this is not working. But generally, it has been pretty flawless. And remember, they perfected it over more than a decade, so it's been for a long time in making.
So what you're saying is it'll probably be there for the NFL sooner rather than later.
It's inevitable, to be honest.
Yeah. So on to some other quick hitting news. Again, DeepSeek has certainly been the top news over this past week, but that's not the only news that's come out of China, actually. So Alibaba, again, we're recording this on February 1st. Alibaba 2 days ago made some major announcements. Actually, they had a whole slew of announcements, not only in models, but some tools for RAG pattern, as well as some system OS tools to help with AI. But one of the key cornerstone announcements was their announcement of Qwen 2.5 Max, which Alibaba claims is surpasses the advancements that DeepSeek had provided with their V3 model. So the underlying story on this is just how quick we're seeing the competitive landscape actually change amongst the various different firms that are creating these foundational models. And you can see from this slide, at least what Alibaba claims in terms of the scoring, how it surpasses, some of the existing tools, whether or not, coming from DeepSeek v3, but they also compare against the Llama 3.1 model, GPT 4.0, the 0806 version, as well as Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And you could see favorable numbers in just about all of these comparisons, certainly against DeepSeek, but even, out benchmarking things like GPT 4.0 and Claude Sonnet. So, it's worthwhile to keep abreast on these things and understand what is really being released in the market. And, next week, will there be someone else that surpasses or claims to surpass? Yeah, definitely. But what I take away from this is that we're seeing a lot of research, a lot of output from, the firms, the labs that are in China, whether it's Alibaba or DeepSeek and, a few others in that space.
It's incredible. The pace at which these things are happening is incredible. As you all know, I think just yesterday, we'll talk about it. O3-mini was already launched. So we'll talk about that as well. And that, again, it's just incredible. Within a week, this is all happening.
And it's like you said, it's the fast pace of this. Speaking of fast pace, I know at least folks here in the U.S. were in an uproar last week when TikTok was banned and got shut off for 12 hours or somewhere around there. There were a lot of interesting talks, not only from a legislative rules and policies, but what firms came out of the woodwork to say, okay, we'll consider putting in an offer for TikTok. So this one is a little perplexing to me, and no pun intended, but Perplexity came out to propose a merger with TikTok. So on the surface, I'm like, to me, this doesn't make sense, but for Perplexity at least. But what they did is they did put a offer out to acquire TikTok, aka, again, remember, this is from ByteDance, Chinese company, and be the U.S. operations to support the TikTok as an application. What was interesting in this is that this is actually the second proposal. They did float an original proposal out, I think it was January 6th, but there's the second one, which the slight differences here is that the U.S. government would have a stake in the new company that Perplexity would be part owner in as well. The U.S. government would not get a voting rights to it, but they would still have a stake in it. So again, I go back to, this is just a one in a multitude of steps from some companies to appease the U.S. government, to align with the national security concerns that the U.S. government has, to have a U.S.-based company be an organization that's in control, so data doesn't go back to China. So interesting. And again, I still kind of scratch my head a little bit why Perplexity would want to do this. Maybe, integrating with their tools and have TikTok there. Probably the obvious thing to me, and probably to you as well, Shadab, is the sheer number of users that, or people that use TikTok. I'll self-proclaim, I am not a big TikTok user. I have, scrolled and seen a couple of the TikTok videos, but to me, at least, it's a time suck, and you get down this rabbit hole of looking at different videos. But anyway, that's where I think the tie is the pure number of eyeballs. If Perplexity had it, I'm sure somehow they'll tie it back to their AI searching tools.
Yeah, and you're rightly perplexed. But although I feel that this is actually a pretty smart proposal, given the position of Perplexity right now, right? Because what's happening is that Perplexity is feeling a pinch. Of course, there's so much competition out there. ChatGPT, people have the subscription. You have the Copilot, you have the Gemini, you have the Claude, and all that, right? And and a bunch of others as well. So Perplexity has been feeling that pinch. They've been trying to grow. They actually offered, just recently, I think this week itself, they have offered actually 1 year of free subscription to all the employees with the government address, right? So looks like they do want to closely align with the government and go into that domain and get maybe some sort of protection. Or patronage or whatever. But I think that they're feeling a pinch, and I think they're just very aggressive about these things. The other thing is also, just remember that there are other players as well. In fact, including Microsoft, right? So Microsoft actually has also seems to be in the talks. President Trump has actually confirmed that. He talked about it that Microsoft is also in talks and in the bidding essentially. But there are others as well, Oracle and bunch of others, Elon Musk company as well. But remember, Microsoft actually tried it earlier as well. Even in 2020, there was some actually talks, and then at that time also. The reason is ByteDance is actually very careful because it's all about AI. It's a rabbit hole because of all that AI and machine learning, and they are not willing to part ways with those algorithms because that's the secret sauce. So time will tell where things will turn. A lot of behind the scene happening, but it will be fun to see who will get
Yep. As you said, time will tell.
it. Yes. By the way, talking about all those issues, Perplexity did actually get into some copyright violations, things as well, trademark and infringement, etc. They got actually another legal case, but that's keep happening. But related to that, U.S. Copyright Office actually issues the guidelines about the AI work, whether that can be protected by the copyrights or not, right? So what it has concluded that the outputs of a Gen AI can be protected by copyright only where a human author has determined sufficient expressive elements. And this can include situation where human authored work is perceptible in an AI output, or a human makes creative arrangements or modifications of the output, but not the mere provision of prompt. So if somebody just using the prompt and generating something, that work is not going to be copyright protected out of the AI tools. You have to be able to make a substantial modification to that output, or you should have a like basically human in the loop in a way that there is a perceptible input and part of the output. Otherwise, this work will not be copyrighted. However, it also actually suggests that you can use the AI tools to assist you in creating the work. That doesn't mean that the copyright will not be granted. So you can still do that, and it applies to all AI generated images, text, music, video, and all those kind of things. But if AI creates a work without meaningful human input, it cannot be copyrighted. That's really the bottom line. And prompts alone are not enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different lawsuits that are pending as it relates to copyright information about using content to create a model, and now this looks at it from the opposite side in terms of what's coming out of those models and what is copyrightable. So it's going to be an interesting journey to see how this transpires. I do believe that there is some creativity that goes into creating, certainly images. When I know, and again, I might go off on a tangent here, but I know that when I create prompts for creating images, I am nowhere near the level of expertise that I see others that create these stunning images. And it really is a skill to, to define lighting, how this is a perspective on this image, the photorealism that you can do. And to me, that's almost of an art, certainly a skill, but it's almost an art in and of itself. I do believe that some of those things that are then created should be copyrightable.
That is true. I do agree with you, Jamie, that I think the prompt engineering, it is an art. It's not just a science, and some people just do it much better.
Yep.
And they should be able to have some sort of a control over that. But I think right now that is what. In fact, this office actually also concluded that the case hasn't been found that requires any changes to existing laws to provide the additional protection for AI generated output. So they're not going to change anything. It was just more of a clarification.
Yep.
Okay, but another earth-shattering news. I would say not earth-shattering, but kind of like again comparative move by OpenAI. OpenAI releases o3-mini, and the essentially o3-mini, and we'll talk about it right a little bit more in the detail. And Jamie, I think you have some demo also to show as usual. That would be fun. But o3-mini, what it does is essentially it's a reasoning model, next level of O1 models. Remember, O1 has the O1, the main model as well as the O1 mini. So o3-mini kind of replaces the O1 mini. In fact, it immediately replaces that. You will not find the O1 mini anymore actually in the ChatGPT Plus subscriptions, and it will be just a O3 mini as well as a couple of its variants. Now, the what it does, it actually provides a reasoning effort parameter. So essentially, what happens is in the O3 mini, now you can actually choose low, medium, and high reasoning efforts. So there are basically reasoning levels, and that provide greater control over the response and latency. There will be essentially a faster response if you choose a low, but there will be much more, I would say, better output when you choose a O3 mini high, right? The other thing is also actually out of the gate, it is ready for the production because it supports a structured output. You can actually get the output in JSON schema. You can also actually use a functional calling. Okay, so with the O3 mini, so it's essentially is ready for the production workload. There is a developer message, right? So there's something called the role, and you can define what role it is, right? So all those things you can do that will help you actually classify whether it's a user sending the prompt or whether it is a system prompts, which is now called developer role prompt, or if it is kind of a your for as a learning you are giving, as an example you are giving, right? So those kind of messages that you can do. You can also actually essentially continue to use this, but the only thing is that O3 Mini does not have vision capabilities. So if you want to use the vision capabilities, you actually need to continue to use the O1 for the visual listening task. And it is available within the ChatGPT Plus, Steam, and Pro users can actually access OpenAI O3 Mini already. It's already available. O3 Mini will essentially triple the rate limit for the Plus and the Team users. Okay, so you get actually more to use with O3 Mini. And by the way, another important feature, it actually now works with the search. So this will be fun because earlier you could not actually use a search with some of these models, reasoning models, but now this will actually work with the search. Um, Another important thing, and I think, Jamie, you have something that you want to actually show a little bit more about the comparison in terms of the O1 and O3. What is it? What does it really highlight for you?
Yeah, I'll get into showing a quick little demo. A couple of other things just to kind of highlight, which are, in my opinion, important. There's been almost the doubling of the context window. You can see it on the slide here, but it went from 128,000 tokens to 200,000 tokens in the O3 mini model. So again, nearly, not exactly doubling, but pretty darn close, whatever that percentage turns out to be. The other thing too is, the model performance. As you alluded to, there's 3 different levels now in O3. There's the low, medium, and high. And this is the ELO score. You could see that even the O3 mini at low is, pretty darn close to the O1 model. And obviously the O3 mini medium and O3 mini high blows away the O1 model in terms of scoring. Now, what's really interesting here is the pricing side of this, because you could do a lot more with a lot less cost with the O3 mini models. I know you were going to talk a little bit about that. Shadab, do you want me to show the O3 in action, or?
Yeah, let me, since you talked about that pricing, I think this is important because as Jamie is showing here on that chart, you can see that the O3 mini high actually goes way above, what the O1 could do. And remember, DeepSeek, don't forget the context that DeepSeek R1 actually was comparable to the O1, slightly exceeding that O1. But o3-mini itself seems to be exceeding the DeepSeek R1, right? Based on this chart that we see, because o3-mini is doing better than the O1 itself. Now, if that is the case, what is the commercial implication of it? So as you're showing the price here, the thing is that the o3-mini has actually reduced the cost big time. So, for example, in Oven Mini itself, the output cost was about $13.2 or $12 for global. Okay. And Oven output cost was $60. But in o3-mini, the output cost of the token is just $4.4 per million. And these are all per million output tokens. That is remarkable change, because what it means is that the o3-mini output is actually just double of DeepSeek R1 output cost. Earlier, the O1 output cost was actually 27 times more than the DeepSeek R1. Okay, this is a big change because now it's just 2 times more, which is a big thing. And also there is seems to be an advantage in terms of the performance, as well as the quality of the output that you will get from the o3-mini over the DeepSeek R1. So this is actually really bringing the competition within just 2-3 days. OpenAI has done this release as soon as this was discovered. I think so. Within a week, we have comparable offering, or probably exceeding offer and pretty competitive pricing from OpenAI on the O3.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic, drop in terms of pricing. And to be honest with you, I foresee this happening not only with OpenAI models, but any of the foundational models as we get better techniques, cheaper hardware to run, for inferencing on. I think this is just going to be how we, constantly see pricing drop. And who benefits from this? It's us. It's organizations, people, developers that are using these models, whatever model you might be using in the back end. Anyway, let me jump over and actually show this working in real, right? So this is I've got let me just kind of explain real quick. So I'm in my ChatGPT Plus account, and I've run the same prompts 3 different times against 3 different models. So I'm using the o3-mini high, the o3-mini there's no designation on it, so it's the I'm going to call it medium one, and then O1. So this, if anyone remembers the session that we just did just before this, it was the one with DeepSeek. So it's the same prompt. So it's all about terraforming Mars. So, I asked it to think about, the certain challenges: radiation, atmosphere creation, and resource management. So what's interesting, when you look at the o3-mini high, it actually provides a little bit of the insight into what it's thinking. So I'm not going to step through word by word here, but if you notice, number one, it thought for 13 seconds, and it's telling you, all right, well, I need to think about this. I need to think about the terraforming project. I need to think about the ecosystem. I need to think about how to boost the air. So this was the thought process. So it's telling you what it's thinking about, and then it goes out and does its output. And this output on the O3 models, and you'll see this in a second, definitely looks better than the O1 model. So a little bit more in-depth thought, and it's providing better context. Now, let me just compare this against the O3 medium model. The output looks somewhat the same, to be honest with you, from the O3 high model, but it's not as detailed. And that makes sense because there's a high model versus this medium model. And you can see this plain as day when you look at the thought process. So yes, it's still telling you a little bit about what it's doing as far as what it needs to map out, but it's definitely not anywhere as detailed or thought steps to go into the actual response and output. And this makes sense. Again, you're looking at a less capable O3 model than the O3 high. And the other thing too, you notice it from the number of seconds, it only did this for 4 seconds, again, because it's not thinking about as much. So this is why, when you look at the cost to run these and the number of tokens and things that it's actually generating, you just kind of keep that in mind. You're like, what do you need for your task? And again, here's the output. Comparing this to the O1 model, again, this jumps down to the response, but the O1 model thought for basically for the same amount of time as the O3 regular model. But again, it really doesn't give you too much background. It's almost like the black box. And I could definitely tell you the output was nowhere near as good a quality from what the O3, whether it's the medium or the high model was. So definitely seeing better response and more openness on how it's thinking, especially in the O3 high model, which you're seeing here. So, and the reason why I'm harping on the thinking plan, when you look at DeepSeek, or even when you look at the Gemini model, which is again is a research model, they're starting to give you the thought process that these models are going through before it gives you the output. So now I'm seeing that equivalency from the OpenAI O3 models as compared to those other tools like DeepSeek and the Gemini model.
I love actually reading the thought process. Sometimes it is fun to see, and I particularly enjoy those DeepSeek thought process, right? Like it's think it shows like a human, right? Oh wait, I forgot this.
Yeah.
It is a fun touch actually. By the way, quick reminder. The while we did talk about the commercial, the pricing, as Jamie highlighted, right? Model to model, the thought process, the internal, the interim token, etc. Sometimes visible, sometimes black box, and that could actually make a huge difference. Okay, so the price point alone is not an indicator of what would be cheaper. So for the user, you should actually play with the models, look at the overall cost of the output. Okay, not just the price point, because interim tokens could be a lot, and that could define what would be your total cost. So even if the price point is cheaper for a model, if it generates way more interim token, the cost will be actually overall high.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
By the way, another fun fact: why it's O1 directly to O3? Why there's no O2?
I could tell you.
Yes, tell me, Jerry.
It goes back to copyright. So I don't know how many people have been to London, but there's O2. So O2 is a communications company based out of the UK. So didn't want to have any legal battles with naming the next model O2. So that's the reason why. So skipping
Great.
from O1 straight to O3.
Good answer, Jamie. I grant you 100 tokens free.
Thank you. Keeping with the O3 discussion, Microsoft actually announced at the same time, actually, that the ability to run the o3-mini models is now available on the Microsoft Azure platform, specifically within the model catalog within Azure AI Foundry, which you're seeing here. So again, all the things that we just talked about, the enhanced reasoning, the obvious significant cost efficiencies and reductions as compared to the O1 model, it's all there. So it is being gated right now. So once you hit this model, there's actually a link here to request access. So you got to provide your name, the Azure subscription. It seems to be a pretty quick process, to be honest with you, in terms of getting access to it. But again, it's available just in the same way that DeepSeek is available through the Azure AI Foundry model catalog. So is the O3 model. And again, it was made available the same day that OpenAI announced the availability of the O3 model itself.
Perfect. Good news for the corporate to start using it right away within their Azure. By the way, another launch again from OpenAI and within the Azure Actually, OpenAI launches a ChatGPT for government in Azure. Looks like everybody is trying to get close to the government. It's the next realm of gaining the subscription and the business, I think. So now the agencies can actually deploy the ChatGPT Gov in their own Microsoft Azure Commercial Cloud or Azure Government Cloud on top of Microsoft Azure OpenAI service that they're using. What happens is that this actually kind of is basically self-hosting ChatGPT Gov. That actually enables agencies to now manage their own security, privacy, compliance requirement, and to adhere to the cybersecurity frameworks, which are like a ton of them, IL5, FedRAMP High, and bunch of others. And this essentially also going to help the OpenAI, as they say, will expedite the internal authorization of OpenAI's tools for the handling of non-public sensitive data. So it's a kind of a smart move because they are still waiting for like FedRAMP High certification for ChatGPT Enterprise. Now this is more of a hosting move, but this will actually help them gain that FedRAMP High certification for ChatGPT Enterprise as well. This is, by the way, this ChatGPT Gov includes, for example, you can save, share conversations within your government workspace and upload the text and images files. You can do the GPT-4. You can use the GPT-4o. You can also actually create the custom GPTs that employees can build, and then they can share within their government workspace. And there is an administrative console for the IT teams to actually manage the users, groups, GPTs, and single sign-on and all that kind of thing. And ChatGPT, and the OpenAI has been used a lot already by the government agencies. So, for example, they revealed a statistic that since 2024, more than 90,000 users across more than 3,500 US federal, state, and local government agencies have sent over 18 million messages on ChatGPT to support their day-to-day work. So it is pretty prevalent, but it was lacking a few high level of certifications, etc. And this move allows to close that kind of a gap, and it also helps them expedite on that process. Okay, talk about another related news, right? This is European Union, and this is AI Act. So as we know, Europe is a leader in the regulation, so they don't. They've already done. Actually, there is something called EU AI Act, and that EU AI Act essentially becomes effective from tomorrow onward. So what happens is this was actually passed in 2024 itself. It became effective actually on August 1st, 2024. But the the timeline was actually 6 months from that effective date. So as you can see on the slide, what it does is the EU AI Act actually takes risk-based approach. So it essentially identifies the different applications or deployments into, for example, high risk or unacceptable or minimal risk or limited risk, etc. And it also not just it just doesn't apply within the EU geography, because if you are a deployer or a provider, etc., it also actually then extends beyond the geography, right? Just like other things, like what we have seen with the GDPR, for example. So it will have a global ramification, and it doesn't try to, like, for example, grant the individuals and fundamental right of an AI and things like that. It is essentially is still trying to actually govern the usage of AI. And as part of this act, they will also actually create, the AI office, and there's a bunch of things that's going to happen. So let's do a quick summary on this one, right? So as you can see, February 2nd, tomorrow, this becomes effective. And what becomes effective with the prohibited practices. And prohibited practices are, for example, particularly the unacceptable risk. Okay, you cannot do it anymore. For the other kind of levels, we will talk about it. There are actually more relaxed timeline that allows you to become compliant and provide all kind of documentation. The actors are like providers. Providers are basically develop, okay, these high risk AI systems. And there's the deployer who basically, kind of providing this like as a like as a deployer, as an application provider, you can say, right? The operator of high-risk system built by the provider. And then there is a distributor who actually distribute these high-risk system by a third-party provider, and there is an importer. The user in their context is actually deployer. Okay, what happens is that in this case, there are actually four important things. First level is unacceptable risk, which is basically things like social scoring system or manipulative AI. If your system is supporting that, that is unacceptable and that gets prohibited right away. The second is the high risk AI systems, which need to be regulated, right? The third is that limited risk AI system, which actually requires transparency obligations, then and developers and deployers must ensure that end users are aware that they are interacting with AI. So it cannot be like, like for example, chatbots and deepfakes, etc. They need to be aware that they are interacting with AI. And then there is a fourth level, which is like minimal risk, right? For example, the majority of, in fact, AI applications currently available on the European Union single market, such as AI-enabled video games, spam filters, those kind of things, right? So those are the examples of the minimal risk, and this is okay. This is like minimal risk. The majority of obligations actually fall on providers, which is basically the developers of high-risk AI systems, those who intend to place on the market or put into service high-risk AI systems in the European Union, regardless of whether they are based in the European Union or a third country. And the other important thing is that the users, as I said, right, are actually considered deployers. So deployers are the users, not the end users. Okay, so that is the definition of the users here. And there's also a provision of the general purpose AI. So when you can say like AGI or the general purpose AI, those providers must provide technical documentation, instructions for use, comply with the copyright directive, and things like that. So there's a bunch of definition. It's a risk-based approach. There is a lot of detail about it. What qualify? There are exemptions as well. So some of the law enforcement agencies, etc., government agencies have the exemption. It can be used in those purposes as well, and that goes effective from tomorrow onwards. Okay, so that's about the UAI Act, Jimmy. What else?
Yeah. So one last thing, I guess, for us today is the word of the week. And I bring this up because it's come up definitely several times during the week, and the word of the week is actually distillation. So let's talk about what it is, and we'll go from there. Let me just take this slide off.
Yeah, DeepSeek actually threw the word distillation back into the memory of everyone, and it has become again another word in the book.
Yeah. So let's talk about what it is, and I'll tie it back into DeepSeek. But so model distilling is really a technique that you use a more knowledgeable model to train a less knowledgeable model, putting it in most simplest terms. But it's where you take all the knowledge from a larger model, a more complex model. Think of it as being the teacher, and you transfer its knowledge to a smaller, more efficient model, that being the student. So this technique actually aims to take all of the capabilities that's within that larger model while reducing its size and computational demands. So when you think about, and again, here's where we'll tie back into the things with DeepSeek, is they took what was in the knowledge and things that are learned within V3, and then they added more stuff to it. But then even within that R1 model, they distilled out other models. Like as an example, DeepSeek R1 distilled Qwen 32B. We were just talking about Qwen, the Qwen Max, different model altogether. But what DeepSeek actually did is they took that smaller Qwen model and then distilled it off of the R1 model, and theoretically, based upon their claims, made that model better than the original model through the distillation. So again, just simpler terms, think about what distillation is. Think of that seasoned professor sharing its knowledge, its expertise with a new student. New student learns how to perform those tasks, but doing it at a much lower cost because that knowledge was transferred to it. And that's, again, in essence, what DeepSeek had done through some of its models that it created after the R1 generation. So again, just keep that in the back of your head about distillation, because you're starting to see that come up more and more. And I will guarantee you this will be some of the techniques that for the next models that we get that are, not reasoning models, but models that can help us in the day-to-day analysis and day-to-day things, similar to, like, let's say a GPT-4o model will do. We're going to see new models get created through this distillation process.
Well, so I think, Jamie, this distillation is, I think, something, again, just to remind users, not something entirely new. This has been around, particularly the smaller models. In fact, Microsoft owned 5 family of models. They actually also were based a lot on the distillation, as well as, the synthetic data training, etc. So a lot of this training, what this DeepSeek has done is really shown a remarkable improvement, and they did some innovative stuff in this entire process as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's don't walk away with this thinking that DeepSeek actually invented distillation. Right. It's been a technique that's been around for some time now.
Yep. And for thousands of years, in fact, isn't it, Jimmy? It's in your glass. That's a different kind of distillation, though. But anyway, just to round it off, just quick trivia. Okay, some statistic trivia. There are some survey results, etc., published by organizations like AppFigures, etc., and essentially, the OpenAI's ChatGPT, their overall spending, and it is being led by the OpenAI ChatGPT, but the overall spending on the AI apps has jumped to $1.42 billion in 2024, as per the analytics firm AppFigures. And this is about a 274% increase from 2023. Now, there are some other interesting tidbits as well. So over half of ChatGPT's mobile users are under the age 25. And you will assume that, okay, the next category would be between 25 and 50. But no, the next category is actually the users between ages 50 and 64. So I don't know what is going on with the millennials.
That's a very interesting stat, and I kind of relate to it because I fit within that category of age users, and I have seen a lot of people in my age group like, oh yeah, I'm using this ChatGPT app, but I don't know if they really understand how to use it. Different story, but yeah, that's an interesting stat.
Yeah, exactly. A bit surprising, but it's good. It's good to see that that a lot of people. In fact, it aligns with the other findings as well. That within the enterprise also, people generally think that, okay, only the young people will adopt it faster. No, even the boomers are actually adopting the AI at pretty good pace. And it's distributed across the age demographic. So that's really good. The other thing, however, worrying part is that the gender gap among the ChatGPT users is even more significant. The AppFigures estimated that across the age groups, men make up almost 85% of all users. And there was another poll by actually Axios, and they found that 53% of women surveyed would not allow their children to use AI at all, as opposed to 26% of men. And this is quite it has a lot of nuances to it, right? Because is this like bridging the divide, or is it widening the divide, right, between the genders? This is going to be important. And seems like women generally seem to be a little bit more resistant and hesitant as per the figure. Although I feel that it probably just getting buried in the statistic, Jimmy. So it is possible, right? So for example, men often make the purchase first, probably in the family. So they may be buying the subscription. Doesn't mean that the users alone are men, right? So for example, I have the subscription in my name. It will reflect as a male, but my daughters are using it, right, along with me. So they're as much a part of the usage. They live in my own household, so they're using it pretty regularly and heavily, actually. Um, my daughter, in fact, has a Copilot Plus PC, and she uses AI a lot. She's a student, so I think it's a bit skewed from that point of view, because they probably are tracking more from the purchase point of view. But if it is just a use, if it is really based on the usage, then it's really worrisome. Okay, so we'll see how that goes. But also, I think the other aspect is also that the women may be a little bit hesitant and bit resistant, because also it does affect them, because a lot of the jobs that AI will also automate can affect the jobs which are traditionally dominated by women. That is one worry. Although it is not limited to it, as we have seen that it is coming for white collar, blue collar, all kind of jobs will benefit, as well as could be at the risk of automation as well. The other aspect is that, like, deep fakes and morphing of the images and things like that, that could also actually, so I think there is a very natural and justifiable hesitation about AI, and I think it is important that society makes it useful and safe for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those numbers are interesting to say the least, because I wouldn't have thought spread would be that wide between men and women, let alone the different age groups. So it's just
Mm.
it's eye opening. It's good information to know.
Yeah, perfect. And that's a wrap for this week.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching. Please tell your friends. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and we will see you next time.
Okay, talk soon, everyone. Bye bye. Bye,
Bye.
Jimmy.